over the last weeks, looked at our image and how to reflect God's image. We looked first at the spirit, and the spirit directs the rational part of our mind, our soul, how we think. And then we looked at the volitional part of our soul, ourselves, which is how we make choices. And the spirit affects our thinking, and our thinking affects our choices. And this morning we're going to look at the next stage, which is our emotions. We all have emotions. God made us with emotions. If we imagine not having them at all, we'd be just we'd be robots. We'd be dead. We'd be just acting and not expressing anything at all. And different cultures express emotions at different levels and in different ways. And so do we as people. In the UK, we tend to have the stiff upper lip and not show our emotions. I was brought up as a little boy with the expression, big boys don't cry. So crying as a child or as a boy was suppressed. That wasn't a manly thing to do. Things have changed as I've got older. There are many television programs now where tears stream down my cheeks and I really don't care. And so we're going to continue now, and we're going to look at that emotional side and see where we go from there. Emotions come in two forms, pleasant and unpleasant. The pleasant one, let's take a practical aspect. Being stroked is pleasant, being slapped is unpleasant. And both of them will bring a different emotion. And many things in life, come and they affect the emotions that we have in our hearts. And so one of the things that we have to say, okay, it's okay to feel emotions. That's something that we need to make clear. God did make us emotional people, and it's okay to feel those emotions. If not, as I said just now, we're dead, we're just robots. And so we need to look at these emotions and see what they mean and what they do for us. And what are these emotions? Well, there are two lots. There are pleasant emotions. And these emotions are love, joy, and awe. Awe is something that we don't speak about so much. We don't, but it happens. Something big happens. It happens, and we get that breathlessness. Love and joy we know well. They're things that come to us in all sorts of circumstances. So those are basic pleasant emotions, but we also have unpleasant ones. And sadly, the list for that is much longer. Sorrow, fear, anger, jealousy, shame, disgust, pain, confusion, and emptiness. Some of them we don't recognize as emotions in the same way as we do others. Emptiness we don't necessarily recognize as an emotion. Disgust is seen as an attitude rather than an emotion, but these are things which come to us in an involuntary way. And an unpleasant emotion is better for us if we recognize it and do something about it than some of the pleasant ones which don't do that for us. And so we shouldn't shut off unpleasant emotions from our lives. They're there to guide us and to help us. I want to go back just to something I did in the early talks, and that's the ABC of emotion. It's the activating event. When something happens, there's the belief in that. What do we think about the thing that has happened? And that will arouse a consequential emotion. In other words, we look at something and we react. And the important thing is that we react in different ways. I think I used last time the example of two men on a bus stop and it pours with rain. One is delighted because he's a gardener, and the other is disappointed because he was on his way to a cricket match. The same event, but different thoughts on that event have different effects on our emotions. We also find with our emotions that we can go into guilt and shame. These aren't necessarily, again, seen as emotions, but as reactions, but they are in fact emotions. And one thing that we need to realize is whether we're conscious or not, we set goals in our life. There are things that we aim to do. And sometimes we set these goals beyond our reach and then feel shame at not meeting them. And this is common. We've all been parents, and we strive to be the perfect parent for our children, and we fail. I'm not telling mine this, but we fail. And because of that, we're really disappointed because we haven't reached the goal that we were striving for. And so we feel guilty or we feel shame. And there are many other things in life that we have these goals and we feel guilty if we don't reach them, particularly if, like children, they're goals which affect other people. And so we come into fear and anxiety. This occurs when the goal is reasonably achievable, but then we doubt our ability to achieve it, or circumstances won't allow us to achieve it. A couple of things come to mind with this, an exam or a driving test. It's reasonable that you can pass the driving test, but most people go into their test with that niggling doubt as to whether they're going to make it or not. And so we go in with a certain amount of fear and a certain amount of anxiety. And that grows if circumstances won't allow us to achieve it. On the morning of the exam, you get a stinking cold. Or you go to take your driving test and for some reason or other, the traffic is so much heavier than you expected. And this brings that fear and anxiety up to the surface for us. Anger, this is the big one. And we could spend a lot of time talking about anger. It arises when a goal that we are convinced that we can achieve is blocked by a person or circumstance beyond our control. Anger is something which affects our lives in so many ways. And anger, in fact, is a very dangerous thing. I know people who have had an event earlier in their lives which have made them very angry. Something has happened against them. They've perhaps been accused of something of which they think they are innocent. And that anger builds up within them. And I know that with these people, I know one in particular that really it's affected his whole life and in fact his health. And he probably doesn't recognize it. He's been unable to forgive the people that offended him. And every time an incident happens that is an excuse for that anger to come to the surface, incidents become an outlet for the anger that he's holding within him. And so anger can be a very dangerous thing if we hold on to it and allow it to build and not to forgive. And so that happens when something that we so often can't control happens to us, we are angry. If we can control what happens, then we feel shame. But when it's out of our control, when it's someone else, then anger arises. But is it right to be angry? That's something which we have to recognize as well. Anger is an emotion. And anger arises the same way as we laugh when something's funny, anger arises within us. It's what we do with that anger that is important. And so what do we do how do we handle difficult and unacceptable emotions? How do we handle anger when it comes into our life? What do we have and how does it work? Well, we can do two things. We can suppress them. And that's what these folks that I've mentioned do. They suppress it. They put it under the surface. They leave it in that place. But it bursts out and comes forward. We can express them. We can express our anger. But if we stop there and become an angry person and then continue to express it, then it becomes difficult. And I'm not just talking about anger at this point. It could be jealousy. It could be a number of emotions that build up within us that we hold on to. And if we keep expressing our jealousy all the time, then it's going to affect our own lives, it's going to affect our own behavior, it's going to affect the other person that we are being jealous of. And we could go down the whole list of those unpleasant emotions and put this tag on. So I'm not just talking about anger, I'm talking about the many negative emotions that we have. But thirdly, we can acknowledge and confess. We can acknowledge that we're jealous. We can acknowledge that we are angry. If we recognize it, then we can do something about it. If I confess, we need to confess to ourselves. We need to recognize the negative emotions that are in ourselves. Say, yes, it's there, and I need to do something about it. And we can do it in simple ways. One of you could do something that made me angry. But when I recognize that I'm angry because of it I can come to you and I can say, look, what you did made me very angry. Let's work it out. And it may well be that you're able to tell me a good reason why you did that thing, to dissipate that anger. And so it's important that we look at it, look at these negative emotions, that we look at our jealousies, that we look at the reason why we're resentful for something. We look at, that whole list, and each one we can deal with if we acknowledge that it's there and not try to hide it. So let's look at the sorts of the emotions when things are difficult. Basically, we long for satisfaction all the time. We know what we like, and we know what we want out of life. And so we aim towards it. It may be just something of leisure. It may be something in our work in life. It may be something in our home life that we long for. But sometimes things go wrong. An unpleasant event occurs. There's a block comes in that stops it happening. And when that occurs, then we get the legitimate pain of unpleasant emotion. It's quite legitimate to feel it. It's quite legitimate to feel sad. It's quite legitimate to feel angry. These are emotions that God has given us. But the important thing is, what do we do about them? Do they tell us something about ourselves? Do they tell us something that we can redirect our life, redirect our longings, redirect our goals? And so we need to learn from these unpleasant emotions something about ourselves. There are two roads that we can take. There's the wise road. We got wisdom, or we got foolishness. And we got a choice of being either. We can be wise or we can be foolish about these things. And sadly, sometimes when we're in a state of negative emotion, we go to the foolish ones. But let's look at them. The wisdom one, when something goes wrong, we perceive it as a disappointed desire. In other words, we're disappointed because we haven't reached the goal that we wanted. But in the case of foolishness, it's perceived as a threat to survival. I failed, I can't do. When we're wise, the emotion is disappointment. And that disappointment leads to a desire for change. We can't do what we wanted to do, but there's always another route. There's always another way. But when we're foolish, we tend to panic. Panic, what if I don't get? What if this? What if that? And then we demand change. You see, we got two totally different attitudes here. One is desire and the other is demand. And that can make a huge difference in our own well-being and also in our relationship with other people. And so we look at those two roads. The change comes, the wise person, it's achieved, and there's gratitude. The foolish is proud relief. If it's blocked, there's righteous anger. But the foolish is rage. If it's uncertain, it's painful concern. And the foolish is worry. It's unreachable, there's a productive sadness, and there's depressing inadequacy. Okay, let's look at that a little bit more closely. There's a far difference between gratitude and thankfulness that something has come about, and that proud relief. I'm thankful that I've got it. And the foolish will say, look what I've achieved. If it's blocked, for some reason, then yes, we'd be angry. And quite right that we're angry, but there's a difference between anger and rage. Rage is something which is uncalculated, uncontrolled. And when it's uncertain, yes, there's a painful concern. But so often when we are in control and we're wise, that concern is controlled. It's a logical concern. And that's different to worry. Worry tends to take us all over the place. It becomes irrational very often. And again, it's okay when something's unreasonable to be sad. But the person who has proud relief at the achieved thing, who takes the praise for it, goes into inadequacy when it doesn't happen. Those are the people who go both ends of the scale, from pride to inadequacy when things don't come the way they want it to. Okay, let's look at the other side, the source of the emotions when circumstances are enjoyable. So we long for satisfaction, a pleasant event occurs, and there's legitimate feelings of pleasant emotions. On that side of the scale, it's very, very straightforward and very pleasant. And in actual fact, if we have our life right, if we make our right choices and so forth, then so often this is the more frequent event that we can find pleasant emotions in the things that happen and things that we do. So there are three principles as a strategy for handling emotions. The first one, fully experience them and feel them. You may think, well, hang on, have I got to feel the anger? It's okay to, feel laughter and joy and love and all the three things there, but some of that list of bad emotions is pretty grim. And here am I saying, fully experience them and feel them. And they are an opportunity. They're an opportunity for us to look at ourselves. Why am I disappointed? Why am I jealous? Why am I angry? Why am I feeling sad? And if we ask ourselves these questions, then we can look into our character. Do we feel jealous because we feel inadequate ourselves? Do we feel jealous because we have different goals? But unless we experience the emotions, we will never ask ourselves those questions. And we'll never be able to put them right. And so here we are. Second is to use those emotions to evaluate what they reveal about your beliefs and purposes. What sort of life do I want to live? How close am I to the Lord? Am I living the type of life that God wants me to live? Am I letting the Spirit speak to my mind to make the right choices? Is it because that's not in line that I've made wrong choices, that I've had disappointments and hurts? And so it gives us the opportunity, if we take those emotions and look at them, to evaluate our lives. And thirdly, be free to express every emotion, but limit the expression by the purposes of love. This is quite a complicated statement in some ways, but we need to let those emotions out. We need to laugh. We need to cry. We need to be angry. But then we need to limit them within love. And as I said before, we live as a church community, and we will annoy each other. We will have differences. We will have these things, and quite right, because sometimes they are good checks on us. But within the purposes of love, they can be put right. They can be healed, and we become better people for it, and we become closer. And so, express the emotion, recognize it, and use it. And so we come to the point is that there is a capacity to feel, and how much do we allow our emotions to fill that capacity? God made us people with emotions. Jesus was an example of this. He wept and then turned his sorrow into action. He raised Lazarus. And making ourselves emotionally comfortable isn't a mature thing to do. It's not good for a little child to be stopped crying the way that I was. Big boys don't cry. I tell you, the bigger boy I got, the more I cried. We do cry. And so we shouldn't protect ourselves. We shouldn't push down these emotions. Maturity is recognizing that our emotions and responding in obedience to them. And constructive emotions are a cause for celebration. This is Ellie Simmons. Ellie won the Gold Cup for swimming in the 2016 Olympics, or Paralympics. She's very disabled, but she won the Gold Cup. In a sense, when you follow what she did, it gives a pattern for what we've been saying. When we look at the spirit, the mind, the choices, and the emotions, in a sense, Ellie fulfills this in what she did. She focused on the gold medal, and therefore her mind was set on that goal. And having done that, she clearly had to make a lot of decisions in her life. The discipline for training. And no doubt, being with the disability she's got, she probably had to face many people who doubted her ability. Some may even have scoffed. But she had to keep her emotions under control and keep her eyes on the goal. And so her emotions were kept in check until she won the prize. And if you go on YouTube and see pictures of Ellie, you'll see her laughing, you'll see her crying, you'll see her hardly able to talk because she is so excited and full of joy. And so in effect, she's followed the path that we have been looking at. The spirit, the mind, the choices, and the emotions. And even with that imperfect body, she was able to achieve the goal. And we too have imperfections, we too have disabilities, but when the Spirit is there, guiding us, helping us, we can set our minds on the right goal. We can have a sense of purpose. We can make the right choices. And we can have the emotions. And one day we will just be filled with joy when Jesus comes again. But in the meantime, we need to be fully human. You know, so often we say, oh, make a mistake. We say, oh, I'm only human. We're not. We're subhuman. Humanity is perfection. God made us perfect. And we fall short. But the goal is to be fully human. To be the people that God made us to be. People who could think. People who could make choices. People who could feel. And be in his image. And the next time we will look at the body, the thing that wraps it all up, the thing that makes us recognizable. But in the meantime, God bless you as you follow this pattern. In Jesus' name.